So good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to be able to talk to you this morning. So today's talk title, Weaving the Divine Feminine into the World, back into the world. And so what do I even mean by that? You know, there was a time eons ago that the ancient peoples, they looked out at this beautiful planet and they said, who made all of this? And the only example that they really had of new life and of that creative force was a woman. And so the creator of all that is must be female and must have feminine traits. And so the very first beings that were worshipped were goddesses with nurturing and love and patience and fearless energy. Those were qualities that were honored back then with all of their wonderful emotion. And it was a time when there was a lot less war. There were more agrarian societies, and where women and children were truly honored. They were special. But in this universe, we run on both the giving and the receiving energies, the yin and the yang. And the dynamics that are created between the flow of those two things is what creates everything. All of creation came about through this positive and negative flow of these different energies. But in the last few thousand years, there has been a shift to more warring beliefs and to a less loving society. And so it is way past time for us to rebalance these energies. So both of these, the female and the male, are absolutely necessary in the individual and in our world. And they hold very special attributes. And so some of these balancing energies are being is more feminine, doing is more masculine. You know, if all you did was sit in your house all day and contemplate and intuit and took no action, that would not be an enjoyable life. And likewise, if you just went out without thought and did mindless action, that is not an enjoyable life. You need this balance of both of those energies. And the internal would be more the emotional state. The external is more one of thought. So we need to honor all the emotions that come up and not be afraid when we have those various emotions. They are our guideposts in life. And then there is the internal process and the external idea of goal. And here's an idea for men. When you're in a conversation with your lady friend, and she's going on about this and that, and I felt this, and in your head you're thinking, would you please get to the point of this conversation? And here's the idea, guys, there may be no point to the conversation. The point is to be in conversation and to share. And frequently that is the only point. And for ladies, please, if you want to have one of those conversations, start it with, you don't need to fix anything. I just want you to hear me. And that lets the guy off the hook. So a little better communication there. Also, the internal is more of a nurturing energy, the bringing of life. The masculine would be more about protection and defending. The internal would be more intuitive, and the masculine would be more logical. So this is all about this balance that has to be there in order for things to really thrive, for us to create and grow. And it was perfect that song, the premeditation song, the voices of the grandmothers, because in the Native American cultures, especially longer ago, the moon time, when the women would go to the moon lodge, the visions that they received were given to the grandmothers. And they then took those visions to the chiefs of the tribe. And the tribe's direction came out of the visions of the women. And then it was left to the chiefs and the men to take the outward action. And because the visions then spoke to, is this in alignment with our best ideals? And so today we're going to look at how we can help rebalance this world that we're living in. And so first, there are a couple of readings from both Kaya and Gaia, and they'll help explain this more and give us more perspective. And so Kaya, are you ready to do your first reading? And you will have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm good, Betty. Good morning. So I've picked a reading, from the words of Deepak Chopra, and it's an article that was posted or written in January of this year, and it's entitled "The Divine Feminine and the Power to Change the World." You hear okay before I go into it?
Yes.
The time has come to think about women's power and not just women's rights. We find ourselves in a drastic state of imbalance because one entire half of the human psyche, the feminine, has been suppressed, violated, or ignored. As modern people, we see ourselves as beyond mythology and in fact superior to myths, which feel superstitious and irrational. But if you look at the great goddesses, Aphrodite, Hera, Athena, Demeter, and more, each symbolizes a divine feminine energy that must be included in a complete human being, no matter what the gender, or even without gender, if that is a conscious choice. The most basic listing of the divine feminine indicates instantly what is missing on the world stage right now. And he lists 6 leading qualities of the feminine that are in all of us. One is mothering, the source of tenderness, affection, non-judgmental acceptance, and nurturing. The second is abundance, the freely given gifts of food and water supplied by the earth. Number 3 is beauty in every form. 4, sexual charm and attraction. 5, inspiration in the form of intuition, insight, and the muses that inspire both art and music. And 6 is peace, the impulse to live as a family in harmony. If the ancient Greeks, Indians, and Chinese could identify and express all of these qualities, not to mention valuing them as divine attributes, how advanced are we who turn our back on them? There is a concerted call for more women leaders because the rampant behavior of the out of control masculine energies cannot be tolerated any longer. But the whole point of calling feminine energies divine is that they apply to everyone. The most reviled leaders in modern history are Hitler and Stalin, neither of whom had the slightest trace of the feminine. On the other hand, Lincoln and Gandhi, both of them repositories of peace and reconciliation, and they both wore shawls, which is a gesture of women's dress. The choices to express the masculine and feminine energies has been unbalanced for a long time. As one psychologist noted, from kindergarten onward, boys are trained to be winners who would wield power while girls gain their worth by attracting men who are winners and wield power. Daring to break out of the mold of the second sex has carried social disapproval and rejection. All of this is well known, and the modern women's movement has strived to redress the imbalances that society has tolerated and encouraged. But even when more women assume leadership roles as they are doing and will continue to do, if men don't respect the divine feminine archetype, they will never allow themselves to be part of it. The painful truth is that the same men who were motivated to kill 100 million people in the 20th century are just as willing to kill the planet. The so-called goddess movement has been vital for several decades, but still exists on the fringes. Its most basic aim is to give a woman a sense of self-esteem and worth in her own right, not as an adjunct to a man. The message has taken widely hold in developed countries and has seeped with aching slowness into the less privileged world. The next step should be simultaneously personal, social, and spiritual. It should be a movement toward wholeness for everyone. You cannot make yourself whole. You can only realize the wholeness that has already been inside you. We all live now in separation, not primarily because of political divisions, but because we are divided in ourselves. The divided self tries to live as if one half of itself, the masculine, stands for the whole. It doesn't, and it never will. Everyone needs to take steps to express the suppressed aspects of wholeness. Right now, the suppressed aspects are feminine, which has been true for centuries. But wholeness can't be destroyed, only hidden. You are an agent of peace, nurturing, abundance, beauty, and inspiration. You either express these values or you don't. The choice involves a conscious decision, and when enough people make the decision, the world will change. Everyone needs to look to the divine feminine. This is the dominant challenge that faces every society, and the future of humanity depends upon meeting the challenge as consciously and as soon as possible. Words of Deepak Chopra.
Thank you so much, Kaya. Moving and absolutely true. And we at Unity here, we speak all the time of getting in touch with our divine nature. And this is part of our divine nature. And so Gaia, are you there and are you available to come to the platform for your reading? And Neil, you will need to unmute your feed. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As you can imagine, Gaia is one of my favorite topics in the whole world. And my challenge today is limiting what I have to say to 5 minutes or so. So to understand Gaia, which is the nature of the universe, first of all, I chose that name in 1989 as kind of a mantra that I was seeking to have life that is in harmony and in balance and akin to the divine feminine and the nature of the universe. So it isn't that I was the greatest earth person or recycler or any of that. It's that that's my choice to become part of Gaia. And Gaia is the mechanism which the whole system of life depends. And that is to make choices that support life. So a few readings to support and explain what I've just said. To first get a grasp of Gaia, think of cybernetics. I know cybernetics is near and dear to the hearts of some of you, but it has to do with the rudder on a ship. So what determines the direction of the ship is not just the waves of the ocean buffeting against the ship, but the oarsmen and the rudder that all create a feedback loop to keep the boat going straight. Mother Nature's the same way. She'll adjust and find equilibrium and balance in a positive feedback loop. This can either work for life or with a lot of human interference, it can be antithetical to life. So the universe operates through dynamic exchange. Nothing is static. Our body is in dynamic and constant exchange with the body of the universal mind and with the mind of the cosmos. Energy is an expression of cosmic energy. Stopping circulation of energy is like stopping the flow of blood. Giving and receiving keeps the energy circulating. And I think that's a quote from me because I didn't cite anybody. So this article has been in my files since 1988 and was written in 1984. And it has to do, it's called Becoming Part of Gaia. And so this was actually my namesake. When I read this article, I wanted to become part of Gaia. This was written by a soil erosion specialist, and the original Gaia hypothesis was written by an atmospheric scientist studying Mars, of all things. So you had to study Mars to learn about Earth. But he cites examples of, well, let's say we see grass in a river, and we see the impact of the river on the grasses as they flow back and forth. But what we don't see is the impact of the grass on the river itself. We see the impact of the water on the grass, but these little changes are made gradually. And the earth makes gradual changes, usually too, but in support of life. So as the grass slows down the flow of the river, it allows the water to deposit more sediments, which allows the river to expand, which slows down the flow of the river and supports life in so doing. So just like the river, countless examples can be found in nature where this cybernetic feedback loop occur, supporting life. And, you know, this has deep philosophical implications too. For our consciousness, we want to look for big changes, but it's really the little changes that impact the difference in the way that it does for Mother Nature. So in 1992, I wrote a paper called The Only Game in Town. And it's based on Henrik Ibsen's play, An Enemy of the People. And since I wrote it in 1992, don't think I'm making a political statement about today, but you may draw a corollary to today. For Dr. Thomas Stockman and Henry Ibsen's play, An Enemy of the People, the only game in town is the pursuit of absolute truth. For him, the choice is simple. All economic or other mundane considerations pale by comparison for nonconformity in favor of that which is right, which is the evolution of human consciousness, the uniquely human power of choice. Dr. Stockman symbolizes a minority group of free thinkers who are willing to bear the brunt of myopic individuals concerned only with their immediate self-interests. The ethic demanded by Stockman surpasses the immediate financial need in order to confer a higher value upon the community. This is what Plato and Aristotle refer to as the good. Skip a little bit of it. So there's a distinction from the good depending on the righteousness of its source. Likewise, author Terence Irwin in Classical Thought cites Aristotle in a similar appeal to the meaning of happiness through virtue. States, if we are indifferent to the goods of others, we deny ourselves relations of cooperation and mutual concern that are necessary for the fulfillment of human capacities. The major issue of the play is straightforward. The pollution of water is symbolically a symptom of a greater malady, which is spiritual in nature. In Stockman's speech to the community, which entails most of Act 4, he states, the masses, this damned compact majority, this is the thing that's polluting the sources of our spiritual life and infecting the very ground we stand on. When confronted with the fact that the problem is costly to fix, the politicians, the press, and the public turn their back on what is true and look to economically expedient but inadequate solutions. So it isn't difficult to establish corollaries to today in our choice in our freedom to choose our future. And Black Lives Matter and all these different movements that are there to create change, we have to ask ourselves, is this for the common good? Because Mother Nature is always choosing the good, choosing life. So Rollo May, and many of you must be familiar with this quotation, human freedom involves our capacity to pause between stimulus and response. And in that pause, to choose that one toward which we wish to throw our weight. The capacity to create ourselves based upon this freedom is inseparable from consciousness or self-awareness. And so these choices end up being choices that we make 100 times a day, that which supports life. Not going into the whole thing, I'll kind of sum up. The first sign of awakening to consciousness is a willingness to be responsible, not to be a burden. Like Atlas, who carried the world on his shoulders, we too must shoulder our own world, which is to say we must take personal responsibility for the unfoldment and management of our own consciousness. And that was written by philosopher George Morgan in The Human Predicament. The evolution of consciousness to do that which is for the common good is truly now more than ever the only game in town.
Thank you, Gaia.
Thank you.
Everything really is related to Mother Earth. And so last week, Betty Bennett spoke a Butterworth quote that is so pertinent for today. And it's, I accept the reality of the situation, but not its permanence. And so what can I do to help bring about some of this balance that we've been talking about? And first, realize that it can change. And second, get quiet and go within and ask yourself, what ideals do I want to see more of in the world, in my world? And then look at what issues speak to your heart. And I know a lot of us do this. And then reach out in kindness and in caring. So I have a bunch of questions to just pose to you. You have to come up with your own answers, but these are on different issues. So in the area of the world, so whether you're making a personal decision or one for a larger community, like here at Unity, does this action come into alignment with my highest goods, my highest ideals? Does it support growth? And what is the effect down the road? How does this affect other people around me? This is the Native American idea of 7 generations. And if you're speaking about yourself, how would it be to begin treating yourself with honor and respect? By doing those things that bring you more peace and calm, and moving away from those things that cause turmoil in your life. You know, the idea of speaking kindly to yourself. You know, mothers speak kindly to their children, especially to our little fur babies. You wouldn't speak to them the way that we frequently speak to ourselves. And honor all of your emotions. So often we run from the unpleasant emotions. Those are the keys that tell you when you're on track or when you're off track. And with our environment, oh my goodness, we could go on. I'm trying to watch my time here, but we could go on about everything that how the divine feminine is represented in the state of our environment right now. And we all know a lot of the steps we could take, from renewable energy and even if there are projects around our community here around Payson that we could help step in and support. But I want to mention one, and this is controversial for some people: eat less meat. Let's eat plants. I saw recently a map of the United States, and it was a land use map. I hadn't seen this one before, where they had blocked out we used this much land for cities and this much for suburbia and this much for industry. And there was a huge block in the middle of the United States. About 35 to 40% of our land is used to grow cattle, sheep, and goats, and the grain that they consume, and the amount of water that they consume. Years ago in Mother Earth News, I saw an article where they had these statistics that it takes 1 acre to grow a cow and enough water to float a battleship. And out of that, you get 167 pounds of meat. On the same 1 acre, you could grow 20,000 pounds of potatoes. So we have lots of choices to make. And what about the little children and all of their issues? You know, Jesus said, bring the children to me. He honored women and children. You know, war is not something to be aspired to. And yet so much of the world's resources are put into the war machine. A small reduction, a small percentage of that could feed everyone on the planet. It's the African idea of Ubuntu, that if one is not happy, none of us can be happy. And we need to step into that bigger, that challenge to make it good for everybody. And how about honoring women's issues, our emotional needs, our need to feel safe? You know, like I said before, unpleasant emotions are the guidepost to know that when we're off track, if we're not on our highest path. So let's all be honorable warriors for the women and the children of the world, and look to see where you can help out. And I know in this community, we have a lot of people that are on this path. They've already stepped up. They're already looking at how can I move into this more completely? How can I hold more compassion, more nurturance, more creativity? So let's allow us more time for just being, for the introspection that we need that precedes right action. We need less time in mindless doingness, the kinds of things that are done without much thought. It allows you to move more into your divine self, and then take your action out of that really centered place. You know, so let's choose something that speaks to you and determine to make a difference in that area, with understanding, with nurturing, being creative, like the poetry workshop that we just had. That was wonderful. One of the easiest ways of nurturing each other is to send silent blessings of love to each other, or just give a simple compliment, open a door for someone. Those are all gentle, small steps that create a larger community of kindness. And with that kindness, we can sort of just round off the sharp edges of our world. Together, women and men honoring both of our energies, we can recreate a world in harmony with nature, in harmony with all the animals, and all of us living a more peaceful life and sharing this amazing, wonderful home of Mother Earth. So thank you so very much, and namaste.
Thank you, Betty, Kaya, and Gaia, for bringing to our consciousness this need to weave again into our world an energy that has been so missing.